It is 2025. Welcome back to the first episode of the new year, the Re-Educated podcast. Today we have an extremely special guest, Alex Wolf. She is a visionary designer and strategist based in Berlin, Germany, whose work bridges the worlds of regenerative systems, transformative education, and storytelling for systems change. She was born into a multicultural family, immersed in diverse perspectives which shaped her worldview and fueled her passion for creating systems that foster collaboration, creativity, and sustainability. Fluent in German, English, Spanish, and Russian, she has cultivated a unique ability to connect with people across cultures, drawing on her global upbringing and education. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm really good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. The ongoing joke has been trying to nail this like bio perfectly down, but you can tell how often I've been podcasting based on how many mistakes I make. It's actually so difficult reading out loud. I don't have too much practice doing it. Do you ever read out loud?
Mm, I try sometimes, but like I
You
have the same
do?
issue, I guess. Yeah. And I also think
Yeah.
like my bio is particularly complicated to read out.
No,
It's
no,
very
no, no,
difficult.
no. It gets, luckily there isn't any scientific words in yours. I feel like the ones where you have to be like, like the paleontology, and that's the ones where I'm like, I don't even know how to say this word. But
Mm,
how are you doing? It's been so long. I mean, I feel like we were just talking the 4 months since I've seen you. So much time has flown by. Time is this weird thing where it's like 4 months means something, but the way it feels can be so different for two people. What has the last 4 months
mm,
felt like for you since I saw you in September?
I mean, we met at the Kaleido retreat in Switzerland, right, in
Yeah.
September. And I felt this was like many points or like many moments in the last year have felt really shape shifting for me. This has been one of them, and I feel like I spent a lot of time integrating whatever immersed in September at this retreat. So I have to say, the last 1 month don't feel as full as the rest of the year because I really took my time to integrate what I learned there, but also to I don't know to reckon with some things
Yeah.
in a way. So I do feel like it's been a quiet time for me.
A bit more reflective.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
feel like those periods are always needed. I think December, even starting January, I've been having to like wipe this like rust off my shoulders because December was so reflective for me, and I kind of took a step back from work, and I wasn't really podcasting, I wasn't really teaching. I was working a little bit on the website, and if anyone's interested, the website is out now, reeducated.org. But it was a period where I feel like I wasn't thinking about what do I need to do, what do I need to get done, and I was just thinking about the past of, what was the journey to get to where I am today. Navigating between reflection and dreaming for the future and acting can be such a tough balance. How do you have strategies to kind of mix and flow through each one of those phases?
Um, I think it's been a challenge for me to do that, to learn that, because I think I'm a really action-driven person. I'm trying to get
Mm,
things done and get into the field, and but at the same time, I'm also an overthinker. So both qualities I think are important in certain moments. And what I'm still learning, I think, is to understand when the right moment is for acting and when the right moment is for analyzing, thinking, understanding, reflecting. But then I also learned another component of it all, which is resting without
mm,
the need to reflect or understand, but also without the need to immediately act, and to just be. And I think this is something I'm still learning and still trying to integrate because it's just as important as the other two things. Um, and I mean, like, what are the strategies here? I mean, for me, I don't have like clear strategies. I guess for me, the first step is to just understand that and to embody that, and to find ways to be okay with that in the current system.
yeah. To even like visualize those three. I mean, you talked about this concept of resting itself, which I feel like oftentimes people in our age group don't really, there's kind of this negative connotation of what it means to take a step back.
Mm.
And it's terribly unfortunate because I think And that's what I'm really excited to get into today's conversation because I think for a lot of people who work with systems change, wanting to, seeing these issues that exist around us and being like, I want to change these things, that work can oftentimes be very exhausting because it's a slow process. And even in the span of an entire lifetime, you may not be able to make the movement that you wanted to. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't worth it or that that effort wasn't seen in some way or another. And so it's like being able to be lost in that world while at the same time taking care of yourself, realizing if I go too hard every single day, I'll be burnt out in the span of the next 3, 4 years, let alone in the next 40 or 50. And so I think finding that balance can be so important. And the earlier that's done, I think the more sustainable you can be, not only in what you're trying to do, but in how much effort and energy you can put into the world.
Absolutely. I think like one of the things I had to realize very early on when doing this work or starting doing this work was that I might never see the outcomes of it to a full extent, and to find peace in this and with this, to learn that I'm not doing it for a reward of some kind, but I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do and because it feels true to my values. So I mean, the reward for me is like the value alignment I'm aiming to feel every day in what I do and who I am. And that's also why I'm
Mm,
doing it. It's not completely like selfless and altruistic. Of course, like there's something behind it that drives me as a person, but also at the same time, like there's not as much external validation as there's maybe in other work. And it is something I do struggle with because like the feedback loops, as you said, are so long. So you're doing something and you don't see the immediate outcome of what you do like right away. And then sometimes you can't even pinpoint like, is it connected to me or is it connected to something else? And that's the whole point, right? Like you're connected to an ecosystem of people doing the work, and you're connected over like you're also connected to the living world, right? Like we're not separated from it. Ideally, like we're trying to shift more into an understanding of being part of it, which means, yeah, I don't know, you can't never like trace it down fully because everything kind of works together.
mm.
So that's a big part of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited to kind of get more into your work and the specifics because being in the education space, if someone was to ask me, what exactly is the change that you want to make? It's hard for me to really pinpoint a specific thing, but I think that's what all these conversations have been building up to understanding what are the problems that I'm working with. What really first identifying what are the issues that I think are problematic here. And then from there designing newer ways of thinking of like, can we approach this in a completely different model? So, in the work that you've done so far, what do you feel like are some of these big picture issues that you have found and you are interested in working with?
Hmm. So I think every path you'll follow in terms of problems and challenges of our time and polycrisis will always lead you back to the economic system that we're living in currently, which is based on extraction of human and natural resources, financial extraction of imbalanced power dynamics, and yeah, colonial structures that are still in place, which is connected to the power aspect I just mentioned too, and to the extraction. And of course, like the patriarchy and everything that's connected to that. Everything is linked to the economic systems, like to the economic system in which we live and how we interact with each other and how we design our lives, how we design education, how we design co-living or living in general, how we design work, um, how we design how we live our relationships, and how we treat ourselves in the nature, in the natural world. So everything is traced back to the economic system.
And would you say that it's interesting because is the economic system built on some values itself, or is that, like how we relate to others, for example? I mean, do you think, yeah, are there some values that influence what economic system a particular group may follow?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like right now, it's a lot about profit maximization for the few. Um, yeah, and extractive practices, as I just mentioned. So, I mean, those are like particularly the values, I guess, but also like free markets and all of this other stuff. So, I think there's a lot of things in there which make it difficult for, let's say, like my values to coexist in, or to find a place in it. Because I feel also sometimes it's treated like a natural law, like something that is like unchangeable, and that this is something that has been around forever, like kind of it's part of how things work, which is not true. I mean, it's been around for like roughly 500 years, and it has changed, and we are reaching now, I think, a peak of it where endless growth and accumulative growth is not possible to handle anymore, because we're overstepping planetary boundaries, and us not being separate from the living world and not being separate from this planet, right? We're part of it all. And we're not like, I think there's like this understanding of us being separate, and it's called like this like dualism, like this perspective of there's nature and there's us, so we can just like use it and extract it. But while we're doing this, we're like also extracting from ourselves, and we're taking away from ourselves. And now it's reached a point where we can't go on like this anymore, just by, it's just a fact, right? Like at some point, resources are empty. There's no resources anymore. Boundaries are overstepped. And yeah, we're also speaking about tipping points. I think 6 of them have been reached already, in our ecosystem. So, I mean, at some point, we got to change something about that.
So
That's just the
growing
way
up,
it
can
is.
you remember the point in your life where you're like, okay, this is something that I want? 'Cause it's interesting because there are a lot of people who I think can navigate the world with a sense of peace within themselves and just be like, I'm going to avoid this problem as long as I need to, as long as I can. I'm not really going to think about it. I can avoid it. I'm going to build a tiny little peaceful niche over here. And as long as I'm
Mm.
just around the people who are around me, then I'm fine. I don't really want to interact with all this suffering that's happening in the world. But then for some people, I don't know what it is that happens, but some people can't turn their eyes away from it. And so I'm curious in your own story, what was that moment in your life where you're like, okay, these are some issues that I see and I want to confront them rather than turn away from them or become a part of them.
I have to say, I'm sometimes really envious of those people because I think they live a really calm, like, I mean, a much calmer life, I would say.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think that anybody can fully unsee it. And I don't feel
Yeah.
like anybody can, like, you have to be so disconnected from your own body, to like not feel what is happening, which is also something, I mean, I'm trying to be as connected as possible, which is difficult for me at times because I'm really in my head. But I do feel like sorry for people who are this disconnected, that they can't feel what is going on. Um, but for me, I think, I don't know, I don't want to like blame neurodivergence or ADHD on everything that is happening in my life, but sometimes I tend to do that. But I think like with a specific case, it's connected because people who have ADHD are really justice sensitive. So there's like this strong sensitivity for justice and balance. And I could always feel when this is not there. And I could not always explain why that is, and what exactly the feeling is behind it. But I think my life and my education and everything I've done for work, or I don't know, just in general, I guess, was connected to answering this question, like to really understand, like, why does it feel off? Like, why does it feel like I never fully understand what people are saying? Because it doesn't make sense to me. And for a really long time, I just thought I'm stupid or like I'm not able to understand this. Like, I mean, I studied business and I didn't get why this would make sense. Like on this human level, on this understanding of like what does it actually bring? What is the purpose of a business on a bigger scale, right? Like on a systemic scale, what is the purpose of it? And we just like spoke about profit and we just spoke about operations and we just spoke about, I don't know, human resource management, but like on this like bigger scale of things, like what's the perfect purpose of its existence? And I didn't understand it. And like I felt like I'm just like not a good student, or I'm not able to understand what other people understand, but it just simply didn't make sense in my head. And then I just like started to try to understand what does make sense for me. And I mean, for me, like humanitarian work and work that NGOs do made a lot of sense. So I started to work for NGOs, and in those NGOs, I felt like the work culture was also very toxic. So I saw this like kind of extraction of like human labor and altruism and really like want to change something to it was just also exploited in the same way. So it also felt off, and I was like, okay, so this feels off too. And then I started to work for social startups or like for social businesses because it was like, oh, at least like people are getting paid well, and they're also trying to solve some societal issues. But there again, like if you are an organization that is like moving in the free market and you have to grow and you have to maximize your profits, at some point, like the purpose of it all is just secondary. So
Mm.
the same thing happened again. And then I was like, wait a minute, like, so what is like the root of it all? Like, what is the problem? And this is where I started to like look into the system itself. So this is kind of how I got to the point of like looking into the system itself. And it was a really, really difficult process for me to see that and to see how much it influences everything and how pointless it is and how we could change it if we wanted to. And I think like many people want to, but don't know how. And other people simply don't want to because they're benefiting from the system. So yeah, it was a difficult time
Yeah.
to work on
It's
this.
one, thank you for laying all that out. I feel like that made me understand the world that you navigate so much better. And it's interesting because I had this conversation literally today morning where I love teaching. Like it really feeds my soul, and it's one of the most beautiful processes that I get to experience on a daily basis. But I was working with a new client, and they were kind of talking to me, and it became all complicated. We had an amazing conversation, but it became a bit more complicated when we started talking about money. And this happens so often, and I'm like, there is an ideal world out there where I could teach for as little as possible, so long as I can just like sustain myself in a basic way. But it becomes so hard, and I've worked with so many organizations who have this problem where it's like we need to pay our employees, but we also want to do all this good work, and we don't want to pander to all these like philanthropists to be like, please give us your money. We're going to send you all this data and all this information about how great we are, because they know how good their work is, but they kind of have to fit into that system to get all the funding and all the things that
Mm-hmm.
they need. And in that process, they're something that started with these pure intentions gets corrupted. And now it becomes about, okay, how do we like market this? How do we build the best website to market what we're doing so that we can make as much money as possible? And it seems unavoidable. This happens in research. It happens I mean, it's crazy how many university professors are simply just like looking for large grants that, they'll do research, they'll publish things just so, they get the right investors. It has now trickled into everything. So I'm curious, in the work that you have, how do you, even if let's say you're working with an organization, how do you separate their need for some amount of funding and money from this like overpowering greed for endless money?
Yeah, that's $1 million question. But I mean, in general, I think the question is like who am I working with and where do I see potential in some shifts? So I think like there needs to be like this basic understanding that the system as it is right now is not working for whatever work we want to do, which is like in the long term meaningful and purposeful. But it's also like not burning us out. I mean, those are the two things, right? Like the first thing is being able to fulfill a specific purpose or like of an organization or your own while not like driving yourself into burnout. Like those are the two important things. And like they seem like it seems like they can't coexist together because it always seems like you have to overstep your own boundaries to make things work because that's how everything is designed, right? So and also the burnout I think comes a lot from like trying to navigate a system that doesn't fit to your purpose and to what you want to do and how you want to do things. So you have to find loopholes. So it's like more mental load and more brain work that goes into this. And at the same time, it's unlearning. And at the same time, it's also healing. So that's a little bit more complex, but this is what happens. So if you're not willing to do all of this as an organization, or even as a person, as an individual, it's really difficult for me to work with you in the first place, right? Because it means knowing that you could have this calmer life, or like a life that is not as complicated or not as like difficult, because you just like feed into the system and you just like bend in a way and you just like stay with the flow. But if you want to go upstream and like the other direction, it means like you have to be dedicated to it because it's a lot of work. So that's kind of the first point. Then the second point, once we have established that, once we understood like this is not working this way, I want to be an organization or individual that is part of shifting the current system into a future fit one, into regenerative one, if you will. And again, right, I might not see it. I might not benefit from this regenerative system because I won't be alive anymore, but I want to be part of shifting the current one towards this regenerative system for the next 7 generations, because that's the way we try to think, right? We try to think really long term. Once we have established that, it's really about understanding, okay, what is going on in the current moment, what is not working anymore, how are we feeding into, like how are we reproducing what is not working anymore, how can we change that, and what is something of the old that we want to take with us. Maybe there's something that is working, maybe there's something that is supporting us in the shift. And then to really, like what I call like radical imagination, like try to understand like where we actually want to move toward. So what is like this other system or this other way of working, and what would be our place and role in this in the future? And then to find strategies, and to find like the first steps we can take in the now to get closer to this. But it's incredibly complex, I feel, to some extent, but at the same time, it's very simple, because it always comes down to feeling good with what you do and feel aligned with what you do. But understand that you can't do it all like right away, because you have structural barriers that don't allow you to do that, and be gentle with yourself in the process. I think that's, in a nutshell, kind of what it is all about.
So when these organizations reach out to you or connect with you, and we can talk about Real Utopia, but before that, when you're working with these organizations, what exactly are they looking for?
I mean, like what I just described, I think is more of like an ideal scenario of like the entire process I would love to do. I think not a lot of organizations are at the point yet of doing this like full process, but I think like usually it's a lot about, if you break it down, it's about like, how do I navigate the current system if I want to do something different? So like that's like the bigger question. How do I get the fund? Like how do I be like radical in my messaging and true to myself while still getting funding and being able to sustain myself financially? How do I deal with this like liminal space of changing and like leaving something behind while moving towards something radically different? Right. So like there's also like this, what I just described before when we were speaking before the conversation. I think like this process of sitting in this in between and like not really knowing where you're moving, but already letting go of the old. I think there's like a lot of fear in this, and a lot of uncertainty in this, also like how to cope with it, right? So by like drawing those like alternative regenerative systems or ways where we want to move to, like I think it kind of soothes the mind a little bit and the nervous system, and to have like a clear strategy in the now, like having like the steps that I can take and still be like, okay, to some extent I will still have funding, I will still have money to like sustain myself. Maybe it's not going to be like 3% growth every year, sorry, but it's going to be enough. And also like letting go of this old paradigm of like it always has to be bigger and better and more. So how to unlearn this. And then another point I think a lot is like the communications around it and like the storytelling. So what do we tell ourselves? What do we tell our team? Like what is the story behind what we do? Because you need a good story to like do all of this, right? I just like mentioned like the whole process that goes into working this much on yourself and working this much on an organization, kind of like swimming upstream against everything else, and just like hearing from all sides that it's like crazy what you're doing, and how will you survive and whatever. And you might find like there's like a lot of difficulties. So you have to have a good story in place for yourself internally, why you're doing this. And then you have to have a good storytelling in place to create a movement around that and convince
Mm,
other people to like support you in the process, be it funders, be it partners, be it like in some cases clients or communities you're serving. So I think the storytelling part is very instrumental as well in
mm.
this.
And so you founded Real Utopia, who is the organization that you run a lot of this work through. So when these organizations hire you, are you running workshops with them? Is it mainly just a
Mhm.
lot of discussions that you're having with them and you trying to understand what their vision is as you convert it into a storytelling format?
Yeah. So essentially, like, I mean, when I founded it, like it was just an idea of the umbrella of my work because I felt it was pretentious to be a self-employed person and to at the point I thought that my work and what I do is like bigger than just me as an individual. So I wanted to give it a name and a place and kind of a home. Because the work I do is also in a way like connecting different dots and it's interdisciplinary. So I work in journalism, but I also work in policy. And then I work with organizations, right? So it's like kind of in this intersection of different things. And what I do then, I mean, is what you mentioned in the beginning, right? Kind of understanding the problem, then understanding, like, okay, where do we want to move, and what could be experiments that we could run to make sure that this works, and then to build prototypes and build strategies to move us closer to this, which is basically the design thinking methodology, which I use. But I embed this in the methodology, which is connected to systems thinking. So it's not just like linear in a way; it becomes more three-dimensional because we're trying to include the context and the systemic perspective to this like strategic process of just designing a solution for whatever, like, right, we're trying to navigate the current system while changing it. So yeah,
Hmm.
it like results then in like design sprints and strategy workshops, in impact assessment strategies, like kind of like trying to find new ways to assess if this is like meaningful or if it actually like has good results. It's also connected to a lot of research, right? To go into the field and to try to understand how can we change something that is currently like not working, for specific
Hmm.
communities that we are creating this organization for, or like specific communities we are serving with our current work.
Yeah.
And then the storytelling part, I mean, I already mentioned is like give it a story for getting funding, for creating momentum, for explaining why this work is meaningful, and for staying motivated in it all, um, and yeah, maintaining the energy within the team to keep
Hmm.
going.
So a lot of stuff. You're kind of like you seem like you're the battery in some ways. Or like, yeah.
Yeah.
So in all the organizations that you work, because there are so many amazing nonprofits. I mean, there's just so many organizations out there who do great work, but there seems to be something else that exists that makes some of them allowed to find funding to continue versus others that just can't do it. What have you noticed to be some of those big differences that distinguish those who are able to like survive for a long time versus those who, no matter how good work that they do, just can't?
Mm. I mean, like my very personal opinion to, I mean, we can define good in a way, right? What would be like a good organization, like defined by which metrics? Like, does it mean they stay afloat for a long time, or does it mean like they are like NGOs also different than organizations that are just moving freely in the market and are for profit, right? It's a bit different because the metrics, the success metrics might be really different. So I think that's also like a first step to like redefine the success metrics. And I think, I mean, from my personal perspective, let's say, what I would say is a good organization that does good, is an organization that is connected to the purpose. I mean, like to what they're doing, to like that feels aligned in a way. So okay, let me rephrase that. An organization that is walking the talk to me is an organization who will be resilient also in the future, not just now, but also in the future. Um, and that is obviously not true for like all the organizations that are successful in the current system, right? But to me, like this is a measure of success if you're able to communicate what you're doing and at the same time actually do it. So when you communicate, for example, about like decolonial perspectives and power dynamics and so on, like I expect you as an organization to do this work as well in the team and in the organization.
Hmm.
So like have equal pay or fair pay for everybody, have decision-making processes that are not like reproducing those power dynamics that we see, um, and be able to like bring work that is of quality that is actually serving the communities you're trying to serve. And again, like being able to communicate well. So also to answer your question, I think this is a big part of a successful organization still in the current system is like how well are you able to communicate what you're doing, right? How how well can you tell the story and how convincing can you present results? Um, I think this is a big part of organizations who are successful, even if they're doing something radical in a way. Or even organizations who are political, um, I think being able to communicate is such an important point in connection to then like what you communicate being truth, right? Being really what you're doing, walking the talk while telling a powerful story.
Hmm.
I think this is what I see as being, to me, a successful organization.
Are there particular forms of communication that you see? Like, because I'm curious, I guess, for like particular details of like what effective communication looks like. Like, what is it? Is it the graphs that they use? Like, what is it? What is it? What is kind of the thing that you
Mm.
notice that like kind of defines good communication?
I think it needs to be relatable and understandable. I think, I mean, the graphs you're using are important, yes. I mean, I think you need to back your claims, but at the same time, people need to understand what you're saying. So I think if you're having like a really complex topic at hand and you use like really complex terminology, sometimes people just don't understand, even though it's really valuable, important information. So I think a really easy way or like an easier way to go about this is to connect it to a story. And often like personal stories work quite well. So like if you describe the process of how you actually got to understand all of this data and how you got to like how you actually got into this field, what was driving you to do that, what problems did you see that like I mean like the questions that you asked me as well, right? Like what are the things that you saw in your childhood beforehand like that actually got you to the point of researching all of this? I think this is always super helpful to like enter into a complex topic
Mm,
to kind of create relatability in a way, something that we all can relate to, which is often, for example, the need for belonging, the need for community, and I mean loneliness. Also, like the urge to understand something that doesn't feel right. Um, and sometimes it's like really like specific stories of or the specific moments of realization or of witnessing something that completely changes you. And I think this is a really powerful entry point into making something relatable. Or like moments of joy, moments of connection with people. I don't know, like something like food, something that is like always understandable in a way to
yeah.
anyone. This is always a good entry point. And then like presenting a clear case of what is the problem here. And I feel like numbers are always really powerful, obviously, like kind of explaining, okay, there has been research done on this. There are numbers, there are graphs, whatever, always helpful. But I think just like giving like clear example and images and stories of communities then again is even more powerful in a way. I feel
Moving
like, okay,
past the
this is the problem.
intellectual
Say
and being
again.
able to, it's like moving past the intellectual and actually being able to connect emotionally on like what, why and what are we trying to do and why it's important.
Absolutely. Like I'll give you an example. So like we had like this year like last year, it's 2025 already, last year in 2024, we have won a prize by the EU Commission for a policy transformation lab in Berlin. And okay, that's like the background of the story, but like I mean in the end, like we pitched this really complex project to different organizations, and one time we pitched it to a foundation. There were other pitches as well. And before the pitch, we decided to start with a guided meditation, even though we just had 3 minutes to present the project. Because we are like, there's so much to tell. Like, I mean, the story behind the project, like why it's important, what we did there, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, I feel like with all the different work that I do, and I mean, like you can tell maybe now as well, sometimes it's difficult to find the right words. I was like, okay, I'd rather like take 1 minute of those 3 minutes to get the people into an embodied state of what we're trying to talk about, than just like fill this like 3 minutes with a lot of information that they will forget after I'm done talking. So
Wow.
what we did then is then just to like after like everybody like kind of pitched, like we were one of the last ones, after everybody pitched, and I could like feel myself just being already overstimulated from all the information I got from the other pitches, even though like they were great ideas, right? And yeah, really powerfully presented as well. I was like, okay, everybody like got ready to just like zone out and not listen to me. And I was like, okay, actually, can everybody just like lower the gaze or close their eyes if you're comfortable? Because we're going to start with a guided meditation. And then I just like kind of started to talk about transformation and systemic change and how it feels in their body when they hear the words. And for some people, it might be excitement. For other people, it might be like fear and anxiety. Other people can be like, of course, it's just not like the one or the other. Other people might feel both sensations at the same time, being excited but also being anxious, etc. And once I established like this kind of common ground of, okay, this is like what we're trying to create with this project. We try to create spaces where we can feel into this and be present with this and exchange perspectives. I mean, what the project is about essentially is to bring policymakers, scientists, and activists together in one room to speak about systemic transformation and create new ways of policymaking. That's what the project is about, right? But it is more about like tuning into those feelings and understanding that we're all in this together in some way, and we all have our emotions connected to this, and inviting them into those spaces and presenting in a way that they can understand because they can feel it was more powerful to me than just to
Say
fill
it.
those 3 minutes with information. Yeah.
Wow. I really like this. Some of the organizations that I feel the most just amazed by do exactly what you say. And I'm not even sure they're intentionally doing it, but you just walk in and you see how they treat every member of the group, how everyone feels, how excited people are to
Exactly.
even show up at work. And you're like, this speaks more than any number you could possibly throw at me. And the challenge, I think, becomes when you have to communicate to people who don't get to spend time around you. And so you have to communicate through this like medium of an online document where it's harder to kind of communicate, because you can easily take a video of everyone smiling and jumping up and down and looking happy, but that any organization can do that. But I think, have you noticed it be much more difficult when you have to communicate it through, let's say, like a PDF or something like that?
Yeah, but even there you can like find ways. I mean, like essentially that's what it like, yeah, it's essentially what I do in a way with my work, because I feel I'm a really slow burn in a way as a person and as a professional. I feel it's very difficult to explain to people what I do if they're not in the same room with me. Like most of my work is through referrals of people who have worked with me before and who know that I do good work, right? And it has a reason. It's because like it's really difficult to like put it in writing and be like, this is what I do and this is what, like, I mean, maybe I could try harder, but like to me it's always easier to get people in the same room with me and to transmit like this feeling that comes with working with me, and what it like creates in the long term, right?
Yeah.
And I do still write about my work, and I like, but I do it in exactly the same way that I just mentioned. Like I tell stories and specific scenarios and thought processes that I'm going through, to get people closer to what it feels like to interact with me. So that's essentially like what I do then in the marketing part of my work, and what I like publish on LinkedIn, for example. It's about getting people closer to being in the same room with me and having a conversation
Mm,
with me, or having a consultancy session with me, or having a workshop with me. Um, and I feel this is more powerful than just like throwing case studies at people, which
yeah.
is also a good thing to do, right? But to me, it feels more true. And I mean, what you just mentioned, right? Like being able to present those emotions and tell those stories and get people closer to you in this way, it means like you have to be genuine and you have to be authentic. It's literally impossible. I feel like it's like maybe for some people it is, but I do think people are always smarter than this, and they feel when there's something's off. Um, I do feel it's like you can always feel when something is unauthentic and something is not true. Um, and this is like the big advantage I see, like if you will, competitive advantage against organizations who are not working in this way, even though like I want to move beyond competition, move towards collaboration in the long term, right? But this is what, when people say like, oh, there's so much hard work and there's so much like money we might lose working this way, why would we do it? Because like in the long term, you will, I think, always win, because you will always be resilient in a way, because you don't have to mask, or you don't have to pretend, because your survival and your success is connected to your being your true self and your
Mm,
authentic self,
mm.
and it's connected to you walking the talk, which is also a good way to check if you're actually like still on track, right? um I think it makes total sense, like in my understanding, it makes total sense to work in this way, and um to base your work on this, because it always will keep you in balance somehow, and will also indicate if you're not.
Yeah. A lot of what you're saying, it's so fascinating because it's the same thing you talked about, that duality of separating. Did you use the word duality or you used some other word where you
Yeah.
talked about separating nature from the self? I've been so fascinated to see how people do the same thing with work, where they're like, this is my working self. I do work for a third of my adult life, and that's me over there. And then this is who I am, separate from that, a different version of myself. And it is so interesting how often people can make this kind of separation. And the things that you're saying, which is to combine who you really are into whatever it is that you're doing, because you are spending so much of your life doing that. And so it doesn't, no matter
Yeah.
what you do, whether you're making sandwiches, whether you're driving the bus, you can pour parts of yourself and your creativity and your soul into whatever it is that you're also doing. Do you feel I'm not sure when it started or why this separation of who you are outside of work and who you are in work started to become created, but do you have any kind of hypotheses or things that you've noticed in why that seems to happen, and what are some of the benefits and maybe even some of the downsides of combining the work, who you are in work and who you are outside?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I don't have like clear data on this, so don't quote me on any data or whatever, but I think, first of all, I mean, that's exactly my thought process. I started to like look deeper into like what actually do I want to do for work, because I understood it's like I think between 60 and 80% of your lifetime you spend at work. So it means also like the people you spend your time with is sometimes, it depends what you do, but like sometimes they're closer than your own family in a way. So you might as well choose wisely what you do and who you do it with. Um, so this is where my thought process began, of like trying to really find something that fits me and something that feels right, and something that feels meaningful, I guess, in a way. And I mean, profit maximization and extraction of natural resources is not meaningful. It's not a meaningful thing to do. Creating shareholder value is not something that is like, kids grow up and they're like, I want to create shareholder value for an oil company, right? Like that's not the dream. But this is like our reality. This is the reality in which we live. Oh, most people live in this reality. A lot of people also don't have the choice to be like, oh, what do I want to do for living? You know, like some people just have to work to pay the bills. And that's the way it is. So to survive this, you have to some extent, separate yourself as a person from your work self, and disassociate essentially for 8 hours a day. Because we are not built and we are not made to sit in a cubicle and to create shareholder value. That's just the way it is. Like, we're meant to be outside, we're meant to play, we mean to be creative, to connect, to explore, to solve problems, again, that are meaningful to our communities. That's what's in us. That's what we are made for, essentially. And then we have to do something completely counterintuitive to that. So how do you survive this? And I mean, this is why there's a mental health crisis globally, right? And depression and everything else, and like loneliness epidemic that you mentioned. I mean, we're like, the whole system is not designed for us to live in communities and to right? It's like driven on individualism and maximizing profit for oneself and so on. So I mean, like, everything is just like so counterintuitive that you have to disconnect to some extent. And at the same time, in the current, like, staying in the current system, trying to make your work your purpose can be really exhausting. Can also like push you towards burnout. I mean, there's like the term for activist burnouts. So like, there's a reason why this is, right? You also have to set clear boundaries. And that's what I mentioned beforehand, right? Being gentle with yourself in the process, like not overstretching what you can do in the current reality you're living in, right? Like, you have to set boundaries. And what we spoke about a lot last year, working on those topics with my colleagues, is non-negotiables. So what are the non-negotiables, the parameters in my life that I don't want to negotiate? For example, for some people, it can be your relationships, or the way you live, or the connection to nature, or whatever. So like, what are the points in your life that you cannot negotiate, and what are points in your life where you can make a compromise in a way, because you have structural barriers of this perfect life where your work feels so exciting and it's so meaningful and it's so creative, and it also brings you money that you can sustain yourself. And I mean, some people have it all and that's great, but I feel like it's the exception. And to some extent, you have to either completely disassociate and just be fine with it, or find a way that is good enough and just work towards more fulfillment in a way, while being gentle with yourself and not overstretching what you can do with the structural barriers you have. So I think, yeah, I mean, answering your question, I think this is the reason why. And I think it's very difficult to find a good balance, where you're not burned out and you're still fulfilling your creative needs as a person, and also like that, making time for rest, and bringing this meaning to your work, and still drawing boundaries, like, while like connecting your work to your being and understanding that you are the work and you bring the work out, creating healthy boundaries, what I mentioned, like with rest as well, and knowing that you need rest to do this work.
I feel like I'm getting a free consulting session myself. I don't, a lot of this has been so helpful to even just hear out loud. And you use this term of like profit extraction, and it's so interesting how when you're dealing with social issues, profit extraction in some ways would depend on you like continuing the problem out much longer than it needs to be, just so you can keep like making money off of it. So it's interesting because it's like it doesn't really even seem that those two can go together, right? Because that you wouldn't have the incentive to actually solve the problem then if what you're looking for is profit.
Oh, that's so interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah. So a friend and I created a project last year, which is called The Art of Possible, where we actually are working on regenerative systems design. And yeah, I actually try to look in this really difficult question of like, what is a regenerative business and how can we bring this into the current system. And one of the first workshops we did was like last year in Poland at a sustainability conference by Change Pilots. And we did the Three Horizons framework as a workshop, which is about the first horizon. I think that's what I mentioned, like, right, like, what is the dying system, the extractive system, the degenerative system that is not working anymore. What is the regenerative system, which is the third horizon where we want to move towards? And what is the second horizon, which is a disruption in the system that helps to shift from one to the other. sounds really complex. I can send you the graph later on for this and like more materials. But to get to the point of consultancy, the workshop was around looking into different industries and trying to understand from this perspective what is not working and how can it be different. And one group worked specifically on the consultancy industry. And it was super interesting to see what they talked about, because it was literally about like completely changing the role of consultants and what they do. In a regenerative system, consultants would be more like mentors or people who are guiding communities, for example, and elders, or people who are healers, breath workers, teachers, right? Like those would be the consultants of a regenerative different system, which means completely abolishing the consultancy industry as it is now, and completely redefining why we need it. And it would be also maybe partially people who would be part of the community, right? Or like part of the organization, or people who would come from the outside, but which is for a brief moment, but take their time to understand. And their gain would not be money or profit, but obviously also money and kind of like getting something out of it energetically. But it would be more about this exchange, I guess. So I don't know, like we didn't think it through fully, but I mean, it was like a really interesting point, because when we were building this project, we were asking ourselves, who do we want to be? Do we want to be consultants? We want to be a consultancy agency? And we were like, kind of like, nah, we don't really want to be that, because it doesn't fit with what we're doing. So that's also my problem, right? I kind of try to avoid to call myself a consultant, and I'm seeing myself as a co-designer. I'm just seeing myself as a person who's like co-designing a strategy or supporting a process or like holding a space, right? I see myself as a space holder and a co-designer, not as a consultant, right? Because I do not see this role fitting into a system that I want to co-create in the long run. Like I don't see this being a role that is fit for the system.
I'm writing all this down. It's, I think I've been watching a lot of random videos about revolutions and just what the steps are. I'm just so fascinated by how when you're in a society, it feels like it doesn't change. But then when you like take a step back and you even think about when we were born in the 90s to now, the world has changed so much. But when you're living through it, it doesn't, because it changes so little day by day, it doesn't feel like it's changing. But you take a step back every 100 years, it's so different. And so to then be like, why can't we, put our thumbprint on it rather than just allowing all these other people to put their thumbprints on it? Like, why can't we kind of shape it a little bit as well? Do you ever confront individuals or groups where they kind of have this belief that society doesn't really change, so all the work is kind of pointless anyway, it just goes on its own path, like we're not even in
Mm.
control of it, what's the point of even trying?
Yeah, because I mean, like it's what you just mentioned, right? So it's simply not true. I think many movements have brought about big change, and it started with like a small action in the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's like this coexistence between feeling completely meaningless because like you're this like tiny person in this like on this like floating rock in the universe, but at the same time like you hold like an entire universe and ecosystem within yourself. So like this
Mm.
those two things kind of coexist together, and that's the same thing of like your like small action can feel meaningless in this big universe of like everything, but at the same time for like your small circle or for yourself it's an incredible shift. So it's just a matter of perspective, I would say, from which like point you look into the specific action or the ripple effect of it, I guess.
Yes.
So
Small and massive at the same time. It is, yeah.
and that's a big problem. Like it's a big mindset and narrative shift I had to go through myself last year, feeling just like being stuck in this like massive picture of the systemic perspective. I mean, that's like the problem I saw for myself as well working in this field, just like seeing the system constantly, like, and everything that I did was like, I can't just like buy this product, or I can't like live my relationship like this, or I can't um whatever, like just like so many different examples, like I can't be doing those different things because of the system and how I want to change it. And like you're just like stuck in this like massive frame and everything you do feels so meaningless. And we're coming back again to this like long feedback loops, right? Everything I do is meaningless because I don't see results. Like everything I do is meaningless because like it's not shifting anything. I don't feel movement because you're stuck in this massive frame. And once you like zoom in into your circle of, yeah, I don't know, just like the circle in which you move and which you influence somehow, and you focus more on this for a moment, like all of a sudden you see like incredible change and fast change as well. And it completely changes the way you feel. So I think for me, it's not being just like stuck in your small world and not just like doing like small things all the time, and just focusing on them. But also at the same time, it's not just being like stuck in the systemic big picture. I feel like the skill of our times, like to learn to zoom in and out, to move between perspectives and levels, to understand that there's like not just one or the other, but being able to kind of, as like a, when you use a camera and you kind of shift the focus.
Mm,
So I think this is like what we need to like mentally learn more to be able to move between those different perspectives, to understand that there's meaning in all of it, and there's importance in like looking into all the different levels, and at the same time understand that the more we know, the less we know, kind of, right? So the more we learn, the more we need to unlearn, and it always continues and it never stops. And um yeah, I think this is what is important from my perspective going forward, to being able to move between those different levels, because
mm,
otherwise we get stuck in old stories or in narratives that are not serving our work. And sometimes we just need to switch our brains off as well, right? So sometimes we just need to, like, I spoke about rest, but like also like one thing that becomes more important and increasingly important in my life, and I focus way more on, is joy, and allowing oneself to experience joy and pleasure. And yeah, even in these times, right? Even in these times of holy crisis and just collective anxiety, learning to find not just pockets of rest, but pockets of joy and pleasure and connection and gratitude to be able to witness this and be part of this and being able to understand this, which is
wow.
also a gift.
Rest, joy, and gratitude. I mean, it often three things I think that are very underspoken about, especially this joy piece. I meet a lot of activists who I feel like are so angry that like there's no real
Yeah.
space for joy. And oftentimes it's understandable why the angst that can arise from not seeing things change and being like, this is so abhorrently wrong. Why are we not doing anything about it? Can cause a lot of anger and also a loss of hope. And I think being able to sustain the space for that touches people in ways that like you wouldn't have even expected. It's so crazy how sometimes someone might just tell you, I was going through a really hard time, but just seeing you move or whatever it is impacted me in this subtle way that you never said anything to me, but it was just the way you believed in someone, or it's something so small that I think having the space for hope, joy, and cultivating that through rest and gratitude is so important. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, I still remember it was funny. I was excited to have this conversation because I remember one of the days in Kaleido, I was having a tough day and we had spoken in the morning during breakfast and I felt so much better after. And I was just like, and it's interesting because I think at Kaleido, you weren't really in your like professional bag. You really were just there as kind of like you're just like, just, you're just a person. You weren't in your like, this is what I do for work. And it was it's so cool to also see this side of you as well, where it's like I am a casual and nice, just human being, but also I do all these other amazing things with my time, and so it's really cool to kind of see both sides of you. But it's been lovely chatting. I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing so much insight.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I think definitely I want to keep these conversations going. And over the years, it'll be amazing to see the things that you pick up working with so many different organizations. Is there a particular field that you work in if someone's interested in working with you? Like, is it all nonprofits or how does it work?
Yeah, technically, it's all nonprofits, but what I focus on a lot is journalism. So if you're an organization in journalism, also like a collective of independent journalists or a newsroom dedicated to systemic change and telling stories about systemic change, super happy to help with like creating a framework and a structure and strategy that can facilitate this mission. So this is something I do. Then I do a lot of co-design. So if you're an organization who works with different groups of people who are usually not coming together, like I work a lot with facilitating those sessions, like bringing together different stakeholders and actors from different fields. So if that's something you do, want to do more, that's something I do. And if you're in general, like any organization who wants to tell stories about systemic change that are powerful, I support that as well.
Lovely. And how can people find you? Your website?
Yeah, I have a website, which is realutopia.de.
realutopia.de.
Yeah, it's like real, the real,
Yeah.
and then utopia, which is, yeah, what I mentioned, right? Like looking into regenerative systems that are not in place yet and making them real through like strategies in the here and now. So not just like dreaming about something, but making it happen. So you can find me on realutopia.de, and it's the same name, Real Utopia, on Instagram, and Alex Wolf on LinkedIn, which I'm using most of the time. Like LinkedIn is where I'm most active. So if you want to really connect with me and read my content and read what I'm writing about, all the stories and everything, that's the best way to find me.
And that brings us to the end of our conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you again for listening and making this process so much more enjoyable. If you haven't had the chance to already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts to get the latest updates on new episodes. If you've been learning useful information here, feel free to leave a review as well. A little bit goes a long way in spreading this podcast. And have a wonderful day. And as per usual, stay re-educated.